All right, let's talk about a word you hear all the time: capitalism. It's a word that gets people fired up, it defines political camps, and it pretty much frames how we see our world. We all have a sense of what it means. But here's a thought: what if we're all kind of wrong about it?
What if this word, which is so central to, well, everything, doesn't even show up in the writings of the very people we think invented it or were its biggest critics? So yeah, let's dive into this, because the secret history of this single word might just change how you see our entire economic system.
No, seriously, Adam Smith, the guy who's basically the poster child for capitalism, never wrote the word. Not once. And Karl Marx, its most famous opponent, you will not find the word capitalism in his magnum opus, Das Kapital. So, if they didn't use it, where did this hugely important word even come from, and what did it originally mean?
Okay, so let's put on our detective hats. We're about to trace the origins of a concept that, as you'll see, is a lot more twisted and interesting than we've been led to believe. You see, before capitalism was a system, there was the capitalist. And the original capitalist, well, it's probably not who you're picturing in your head. For that, we've got to go back to 18th century France. And this is where it gets really wild. The original capitalist wasn't some innovative factory owner or an entrepreneur risking it all in the market. Nope. They were a state financier, a wealthy person who lent huge sums of money to the French monarchy, mostly to pay for its wars. So the whole idea begins not with private enterprise, but with public debt and conflict. The journey of this word is just fascinating. It starts as a person, the capitaliste. Then, almost a century later, by the 1830s, French royalists start using a new word, capitalism, as an insult. They used it to bash what they saw as this rootless, corrosive international financial system. But the real game changer comes in 1850, when the French socialist Louis Blanc picks it up and gives it a very specific and really surprising meaning. Just listen to this quote from him. "Long live capital. Let us go on to attack capitalism, its mortal enemy." Wait, what? How can capital and capitalism be enemies? It sounds like a total contradiction. But that one sentence, that's the key to this whole puzzle. So here it is. For Louis Blanc, the guy who really made the word famous, capitalism and capital were not the same thing. Capital, the money, machines, resources, was absolutely essential. Capitalism, however, was the specific system where that capital was owned and taken by private hands. The problem wasn't the stuff itself, the problem was who controlled it. His solution wasn't to destroy capital, but to socialize it, to use the state to neutralize what he called capitalism. And this intense new focus on ownership ended up completely overshadowing an older and maybe more fundamental way of looking at the modern economy. It buried a concept that came before it: commercial society. Yeah, back to Adam Smith. Before the entire debate became about capitalism, thinkers like him were describing something else entirely. They weren't fixated on property and ownership. They were trying to get their heads around what they called commercial society. For Smith, the single most important feature of modern life wasn't capital. It was the division of labor. The fact that we all specialize in one thing and then have to trade with each other to get what we need. As he put it, in this world, society itself becomes a commercial society, where every one of us becomes, in a way, a merchant. The fundamental question wasn't about ownership, it was about how we handle this giant complex web of interdependence. And right there, that is the core distinction that really changes everything. Are we looking at the world through the lens of property or through the lens of the division of labor? Because those are two very, very different ways of seeing things. Think of it like this. Capitalism, as it was originally defined, is a theory of property. It asks the question, who owns the means of production? Is it an individual, the state, a cooperative? But commercial society is a theory of, well, society. It asks a completely different question. Given that we are all caught in this inescapable division of labor, how in the world do we manage being so dependent on one another? So, why does this distinction matter so much? Well, think about it. It's pretty easy to imagine alternatives to private property. We have words for them, like socialism and communism. But can you actually imagine a modern world without the division of labor? It's almost impossible. And because we've smashed these two very different ideas together, the property question and the social question, we've trapped our political debates in the same narrow lane for over 150 years. If you look back before the word capitalism just swallowed everything else, you find that many of the 19th century's sharpest minds were actually busy working on the problems of commercial society. In other words, the challenge of managing the division of labor. And this is where you can see the two paths just split apart. On one path, you've got Marx. He's focused entirely on the problem of property, what he called capitalism, and his solution is to abolish it. But on the other path, you see all these other thinkers tackling the messy problems of commercial society. People like Hegel, Ricardo, Stein, they weren't trying to blow up the system of property. They were building the tools of modern government. Public administration, fiscal policy, social democracy, to try and manage this deeply interconnected world.
So, what this secret history really suggests is that our endless tug of war, this constant battle between pro-capitalism and anti-capitalism, might just be a huge distraction. By focusing only on who owns what, we may have forgotten to ask a much bigger and maybe more important question.
Maybe the defining challenge of our time isn't about choosing a side in the old fight over capitalism. Maybe it's about rediscovering the lost art of governing our deeply interconnected, sometimes chaotic, and completely inescapable commercial society. What do you think? It's a question that takes us beyond the old labels and into a whole new way of thinking about the world we all have to share.